For the last few days, the Belgians have been having a stare down with the rest of the European Union. And it has to do with a plan to seize Russian assets that are currently held in banks from Cyprus to a bunch of other European states, but mostly in Belgium, in Euroclear, to seize those assets and use them to both pay off some of Ukraine's loans, about 45 billion euros worth of that, but then use 165 billion of those euros to fund both the Ukrainian government so it can pay its civil service workers and stuff like that, as well as 110 billion euros towards its self-defense and its military industries. These funds would be given to Ukraine from the frozen funds in Euroclear, but also across these other banks and financial institutions, on top of the $3.5 billion aid package and tranche that has been negotiated alongside this, that was recently negotiated by the different bureaucrats meeting in the last 48 hours. So this stare down around this has to do with the fact that the Belgians, they have a lot of financing in Belgium where the Russians have money there because they're trusted to have money there. They trusted that they could have their money there without it being seized, without it being taken, because they trusted Belgian law. At least that was the idea behind putting money there. You wouldn't put money there otherwise. And the reason why the Russians could make that bet is irrespective of the fact that Russia has invaded another country, irrespective of the fact that Russia started the largest war in Europe since World War II, and this is against Belgium's direct interest. Belgium, in order to be respected as a country working in finance, in order to be able to keep capital confident in being able to operate in Belgium, they don't want to seize money in a manner that could be deemed illegal or in disrespect of court decisions. Because if Belgium shows that it can do that, then somebody might say, I don't really care. This might piss off some of Russia's immediate allies. Screw that. But you might think of somebody else, like a different country, thinking, look, I don't really care about what Russia did here or Ukraine. What I care about is that Belgium in the future won't take my funds, my capital, which I've put in their country, and seize it, and then just say, I don't care about the court decision. We're just going to do whatever Belgium wants to do. And so this has led to Belgium dragging their feet on seizing these assets, not only because of the threat that if Russia challenges this in court and it's decided that the funds have to be given back to Russia, that Belgium would then be on the bad end of a big, big bill of funds that they're going to have to pay over to the Russians, but also due to the possible suppressionary effect on investment in Belgium because they're willing to take assets like this, period. That's what I think. The primary thing that they've been focusing on negotiations is the idea that Belgium will have to be on the hook for a big payout like this. But I think another big part of it is that this is probably something that has made them generally uncomfortable for a bit, and they have expressed it as such in the past. Now that it's gotten to this point where the United States has shown that they're not, currently the federal government is not willing, due to its chief executive, to put forward any more aid packages. And it was a struggle just to get the weapons sales and the tranches of weapons sales that have been going from American defense companies to the Ukrainian battlefield at this point. This is something that, the Europeans have fought for and they're able to get, but they're not going to be able to wait for some savior to come in and fix the situation. They're going to have to finance it. They're going to have to supply it themselves. And that means either going to their taxpayers and saying, look, we're going to have to find a way to fix this and fit this into the budget. At the same time, we're putting through austerity measures has been quite difficult for the French government. And it's not just the French government that's having this problem. The German government has to finance massive infrastructure investment. While the Germans have made a debt mechanism so they can go around it for supporting Ukraine and national defense spending, that doesn't mean that they want to go into immense debt. You don't just completely kill German anti-debt culture overnight. And so the question of, should it be European taxpayers covering this or Russian assets, Russian businesses, Russian oligarchs those who continue to support and finance the war, and those who not only support the war structurally, but even support the war in many instances personally. Well, the decision most European leaders have come to is that the Russians should. It should be the Russians that pay it. The problem for the Belgian is that having Euroclear there and having such a disproportionate amount of Russian assets be in Belgium means that they're the ones that would, at the end of the day, if the decision was decided in the courts that they'd have to pay the Russians back in the long haul, which there is a possibility, but there's also a possibility that that might not be the case. If that is the case, though, they don't want to be on the bad end of that decision. And so what the Belgians have said, and this is what they're going to negotiate over the next 2 weeks before they come to a final decision on December 18th of this year. So we're talking about 2 weeks away. The decision that they've come to is, look, we'll do something if you can make sure that we won't be on the hook for anything. But that anything has not only included like an exact amount, but even going past that amount. And basically, it seems to be that while the European Commission and the Belgians both acknowledge that the Belgians do have excess risk when it comes to this scenario, there might be some disagreement on how that excess risk should be shared. And I think that's going to be the big difficulty in the next 2 weeks, as the Europeans have to find some way to continue to finance the Ukrainians through 2025 into 26 into 27. Because right now, the way that they're talking, they're saying that the Ukrainians are going to be out of funds come April of 2026. And so they need to figure something out in the meantime. And they don't want to be buzzer beating the whole time. You want to give the Ukrainians an ability to plan for the future if you want to plan for success. So the quicker you can get the Belgians on board, the better. But the Belgians have to understand that just because they're the one that have benefited the most from Russian capital, or that they have benefited quite in excess in comparison to other European powers in Russian capital, that does not mean that people need to extra stick out their neck for them. It's one thing to share the risk, but Belgium, if it wants to be taken as a serious European country contributing seriously to European defense, it has to pull its weight. And it has to use the assets that's available to them. Because in many instances, some countries are going to have better assets than other countries when it comes to supporting Ukraine. Some countries are going to have more artillery production. Some countries are going to have more Russian assets that could be seized. Some countries are going to have more funds at their disposal. Some countries are going to have more Soviet stockpiles that they can give up. And whatever asset that they can have, there's a problem with the disconnected nature of European industry. There's a problem when it comes to the different types of ammunitions that they have and the disjointed political groupings that disagree about exactly what to do. But one advantage is with so many different countries is that many countries do different things well. And so you could try to lean into that advantage at least a little bit. And this is what advantage that the Belgians can lean into. They just need to be given the push to do so. Wouldn't it be nice if we had an America that could make that push? Seems disinterested, though. Even though, where's this money going to largely be spent? American defense companies. And even though the Trump government is open to the idea, they don't want to push for it. They don't want to pull the trigger on Russia, don't want to pull the trigger on getting more European support to Ukraine. Looks like it's up to Europe. Up to Brussels. Did you guys see this headline with NBC News? You've been watching the Dylan Burns TV stream. You know this for a while. Ukrainian soldiers see Trump plan as capitulation.